And welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com, the mobile app, as well as YouTube. He is Howard Cross. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Giants. Multiple ways you interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You could also follow and interact with us on Twitter, hashtag Giants Chat. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. He is at Howard Cross 87. Howard is huge on social media, so don't shy away from getting his feedback. He loves to weigh in on absolutely everything. And we are broadcasting live from the Giants podcast studio. It is presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. So a lot to tackle over the course of the program. We'll obviously give our takeaways from a big win for the Giants at home against the Chargers, their first victory of the season, Jackson Dart's debut, and then, of course, the news that Malik Neighbors, unfortunately, out for the season with the torn ACL. But before we delve into that, I just want to read a statement issued by President, CEO, and co-owner John Mara, which came out right after yesterday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, and it says the following, quote, "I have recently been diagnosed with cancer and have been following the treatment plan recommended by an outstanding team of doctors. I'm feeling strong and optimistic, and I'm committed to seeing this through to a positive outcome. I plan to remain active with the team throughout my treatment, and I'm fortunate to be surrounded by incredible support, personally, professionally, and medically. I ask that you respect my privacy and my family's privacy at this time," end quote. And we're not necessarily going to delve into it in greater detail. I think it speaks as it is, but certainly everyone involved in Big Blue Kickoff Live, as well as the organization, wishing John Mara the best in terms of his fight against cancer. As far as the game is concerned, Howard, I want to tackle a few different topics, and I want to start with the Giants' defense. And you were on the sideline, so you certainly saw this firsthand. Really an impressive overall showing in the pressure department. Mm-hmm. You look at the numbers, they got a 50% pressure rate on Justin Herbert in terms of his dropbacks. And it's not even the sacks. You'll take that, but the quarterback hits, and it was the three-headed monster. It was clearly Abdul Carter, who had 5 of them. Then you had Brian Burns, and then, of course, Kayvon Thibodeau. And the Chargers did not score in the fourth quarter. They forced them to punt. And remember, that game was within striking distance, so a big play here or there could have been the difference. But the Giants' defense made by far its biggest statement of the season.
Well, the Chargers' offensive line was a little beat up.
Sure.
And then their left tackle went out, Alt went out, and then all of a sudden it was a jailbreak. They just couldn't stand up to them, and then that's what you want. You want to take advantage of guys when they're down. You got to kick them when they're down. I hate to say it, but you just do. And they did a great job of getting around. Burns had an incredible game. Thibodeau was doing good. Carter was doing good. Even Big Dex was getting in the backfield and chasing guys around. So it was fun to watch them all get after it like that.
And Dex nearly had a touchdown.
Now, if Dex
he was close.
If Dex would have ran into the end zone, that'd have been 10 more yards. Then we may not have saw him for the rest of the game. I think he had ran as far as he could go.
He would have needed the oxygen tank, is what you're saying?
He had plugged it in.
I will say this, Howard. I think Herbert made a wise decision. If he went any higher, I don't think he would have had any luck taking out Dex.
I don't know what he was thinking. He should have just walked off the field and just let him go ahead and run. You won't be back in the game. And big guys running that far, they're like, please tackle me. Please tackle me.
Well, it'll still make the highlight reel regardless, but those turnovers were huge because it shortened the field for the offense, and they wound up scoring 11 points off of the 2 interceptions because Andrew Phillips' return was big too and put them pretty much right in the red zone. So I always say this, Howard, and we've had a lot of conversations on and off the air. Takeaways are great, but I think it's all about what you do with them, and I think that was that complementary aspect that was in play on Sunday.
Well, they did a good job. They didn't do as great a job as they wanted to in the red zone, but they did do a good job putting points on the board no matter what. They weren't giving the ball back. They weren't turning it over. And they had 2 more interceptions that, if there weren't for penalties, they would also have counted. So it was a pretty good game by the defense all around. They put on a pretty excellent display of ability out there, and I was very happy to watch them.
Yeah, it was +2 in terms of turnover differential. The Chargers also 4 of 12 on third down. Mm-hmm. That's why we didn't see a lot of extensive drives. Now, there were explosive plays. The Quentin Johnston touchdown. I thought that was a heck of a throw by Justin Herbert between 2 defenders.
He did, man.
He threaded that needle.
He can put some wind behind that thing, boy. I was laughing because he was flipping the ball sidearm sometimes 30 yards, and I
crazy.
Couldn't believe he was doing it off balance. He was like, okay, throw it around Dexter, slip 30 yards right on the money.
ball placement is just ridiculous, and it's nothing new. I mean, Herbert is, at this point in his career, a polished veteran, and even under pressure, he was still able to make some big throws. And then, of course, there was the Omari and Hampton 50-plus yard touchdown run where the hole opened up on the right side, and then basically it was a foot race to the end zone.
But they lost contain. Once you lose contain with a back that's that big and fast, you're gonna catch some grief. And he just hit it right on the head there, because I was trying to figure out like which guy was supposed to be on the outside. It's just the defensive end kind of tried to dip inside a little bit, and when he did, it was over.
And listen, that's what Hampton did all throughout his career at UNC.
Yeah.
So it was only a matter of time, and they're going to start to force feed him, given Najee Harris is out for the season with the torn Achilles. I'm a bit surprised. I mean, not to get off topic here, the Chargers, Howard, they've always been a run-heavy team. They've actually put more on Herbert's plate because Hampton only had 12 runs. Now, maybe that was game flow in terms of what the Giants did, but I was a little bit surprised that the Chargers didn't emphasize, I guess, the run game a little bit more, especially given the Giants' issues in that department.
Well, in my mind, I would think they were trying to throw the ball because they probably watched the Dallas game. They saw all the big plays down the field. If you can get the ball down the field, you can score a lot of points. And Harbaugh, it's a history of bringing quarterbacks up. And even though he does like to run the ball, but he does have a history of quarterbacks and getting the ball down the field. From Stanford out there, you had him when he was coaching in San Francisco. Every spot he's in, he likes to get the ball down the field. And it was just in college when when he was in Michigan, where he didn't really throw the ball a lot because his team just wasn't built for it. But now that he's back in the league, what a quarterback that can throw the ball down the field. You see in him, push it, putting the power and putting a lot of the pressure and everything on the quarterback. Yes, they got a fabulous running back. Yes, the kid can hit a home run, but the quarterback can hit a home run almost every time he touches the ball.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks, let's flip the script. Jackson Dart making his first career start, and to help the team get a W in front of the home crowd certainly was a really nice development. You saw the embrace with Brian Dable after the game. As far as Dart is concerned, we weren't surprised because we knew he had the athleticism and the legs, but boy, does he like to run when the opportunity presents itself. On the opening drive, the rushing touchdown, and we know he was briefly taken out of the game because of the long run. It was ultimately called back due to a penalty. But, that's what Dart brings to the table that I think is a little bit different than Giants quarterbacks on the roster as well as other quarterbacks that we've seen across the league.
Yeah, I mean, he likes to run the ball. The thing is, he's going to have to learn how to get down, how to slide a little bit more.
Yeah.
He's a big physical kid. He wants to, have a little contact. But when guys run a long way to hit you, they tend to hit you pretty hard once they get there. So he's going to have to learn to get down. I thought he did a good job of, the runs weren't always designed runs. Sometimes there were RPOs where he would pull the ball out, reading the defensive end. If the end was coming down hard, he would just, pull it out of the running back's stomach and run up the field. That was designed. You could see it happening every time that the Scadaboo or Singletary was running to the end. If the end came to meet them, he would pull the ball out and run. They're going to develop that into the pass also. Once they can stop that end from coming, if it's designed that way, they'll be able to have a quick hit over the top, and then they'll get some quick yards out of it. But it looked good. He was smart. I saw him throw the ball around. Like, we were just talking about how Herbert threw the ball around somebody. I saw Dart throw the ball around people too. So that was good. He changed a lot of arm angles. That helped out a lot. Guys caught the ball for him, and they went up and made plays for him. So that helps out. And when someone asked me, how will Dart play in the game, I said, as long as the others play well, he'll play well.
Hey, it's all about the environment around the quarterback. We've talked about that for ages, and we saw a little bit of the sidearm throw even in the preseason.
Yes.
So we know he has the ability with the different arm angles, as you mentioned. Well, as far as the playmakers, it was a modest passing game, and that was because they had success on the ground. They ran for $161, 111 through the air, but now the question becomes, okay, Neighbors is no longer in the equation, and it goes without saying he's your best receiver. He's going to draw attention with opposing defenses. The Giants are not going to present that, Howard, anymore in the receiving corps. So you know how defenses approach Dart and company is going to change. They don't have one wide receiver that you have to maybe roll coverage over to. So I could see it being a spread the wealth mentality now moving forward. Darius Slayton, you have the veteran, Wan'Dale Robinson, but there's a golden opportunity for another wide receiver now to at least get additional reps and routes. And the question is, can a third option emerge who's not necessarily a tight end?
Well, Hyatt's is still in the equation.
Yep.
We got Bo Collins also still in the equation. Two guys that can really get down the field and spread the field with their length. Bo especially, because he's a really tall guy, can really cause some problems. We saw him in the preseason catch a long pass, and they were going to him often. And Dart, that's when Dart was being the backup. He would be probably running scout team. When he's in scout team, he's throwing the ball to Bo. He's throwing the ball to Hyatt. So these guys are familiar with him, and he's familiar with them. So it's going to be interesting to see how Coach works them into their offense in the passing game.
Well, Hyatt, we talked about all offseason, right?
Yep.
Huge opportunity in front of him. Unfortunately, he was a little bit banged up during the preseason, and now his number, to your point, is going to be called again. Mm-hmm. And if they can get him on the field and he can build that rapport with Dart, that's the vertical threat that they're desperate to involve consistently in the offense. Here's another guy that I'm intrigued by. What about Gunnar Olszewski, who showed some flashes as a receiver we saw, and he's a little bit more experienced. I wonder how much more chances he'll get. He is involved in special teams, Howard, but I wouldn't necessarily mind if perhaps they opened up the offensive playbook, because he showed even during the preseason that he's capable of being a playmaker within that facet.
I like Gunnar also as a receiver, but I think that they need a returner. You can't risk having him get banged up out there, especially when he's doing punt returns and the ball's been, I don't even explain how they're kicking the ball in there. It's wobbling through the air and stuff. Sure. It's bouncing short, and you need a guy out there that's really confident and understands all the spins and what could happen or where he needs to be to catch the ball. If he goes out and just gets nicked up as a receiver, that really puts pressure on the return game and special teams.
Well, and I think also it's a reminder, without Neighbors in the mix, the importance and value of the run game in conjunction with Dart. Cam Scadaboo now is the featured back with Tyrone Tracy sideline, and we know he runs hard, and he was productive, and he could take on contact, but they're going to need him to set up extremely manageable downs, especially without Neighbors out of the equation, because I understand this is maybe stating the obvious, Howard, but you don't want Dart facing 3rd and 11s and 3rd and 13s. I don't think they have the personnel to sustain that, and I think that's a very precarious spot to put a rookie quarterback in.
Well, it also puts a lot of pressure on your offensive lines. But talking about Scadaboo, watching him run is very entertaining in the sense, if you stand in the end zone and you're watching him, you would know this, not that tall.
Thanks for the reminder. I appreciate it. Yeah.
But
I haven't looked in the mirror lately, but now you've opened up the horizons.
But when he's running the ball, like he's behind the offensive line, and he's jumping over their legs and under their arms at the right moment, and then putting his feet in the ground and starting around. It's funny because you don't usually see back where you're like, most backs will be like, okay, there's no hole there. He literally jumps between the guys like tweak, and then starts to run. I'm like, that's pretty funny. And sometimes when he does it, it shocks the linebacker because the linebacker did not see him coming. He's looking for him. He's
and then all of a sudden he pops out.
Because in theory, there's no hole here. And he's running through that spot. So the linebacker's like, what? Wait a minute. So how do you do that? So that I can see them, you go into the sideline, they're talking to each other, trying to figure out like, okay, we got to try to figure this out earlier. We got to slant or something to keep him from jumping between the guys and running upfield. And that's like I said, he runs like he's a really big guy, but he's a small guy. And that's kind of an advantage he has.
Well, and he also punishes the opposition too when you combine the element of surprise with the fact that clearly he's hard to bring down.
Yeah, you don't want him on the secondary guys. Secondary guys do not want to see him. Here's the thing I'm worried about though, because he runs head forward. Not shoulders, not behind his pads. Something he really runs head forward. And the Red Caps these are the guys who are the independent guys that are checking for injuries and head injuries specifically. Eventually, somebody's going to blow the whistle and say hey, can we get him out for a few minutes and talk to him and everything. So I that's the thing that I worry about more than anything else. Not that he's going to get hurt, not that he's going to get a concussion, just at an inopportune time, like what they did with Dart. They'll say hey, we need to see you on the sideline. And Dart obviously didn't hit his head. he was just tired.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
and he was crouched over.
Crouched over. Bring him out of the game. He's like, what? So now he knows he's got to pop up and get back to the huddle after 70 yards.
Well, he reflected on that after the game, Howard, and he said, listen, anybody that runs that distance is going to be tired. But as you well know, the individuals up top, it's all interpretive. It's based on optics because they're not next to you, so they don't know whether or not you hit your head on the turf. They're going based on, he looks hurt, he just took a hard hit, so therefore we're going to be careful. And I don't blame them under the circumstances. It's a different game. Well, you played during a time. You have a perspective, but in this day and age,
if you're literally watching through binoculars because you're upstairs or watching the screen or whatever they're looking at, you could tell he didn't hit his head. And you could tell that the guy didn't contact his head. He didn't have a violent jerk. He was just winded. And those, not, I'm all for player safety, but you have to know what's going on when you're making that call. And I guess better safe than sorry, but man, can you imagine if that was like the drive that we had to have at that moment? And
there's a minute left in the fourth quarter, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
I get it.
It could be crazy.
No, and I'm with you. I understand, I guess, why they're being extra cautious. And in the big picture, he barely missed any time. It was a very small sample size here.
Just don't like it.
No, and well, you love the attitude, the fact that he doesn't want to come out of the game. And we saw that even during the preseason and even the plays or two that he came in previous regular season games when they used him as a runner. So you don't question his drive. I mean, if you didn't want to come back in the game, I think there's more to question. But I guess I understand where the league is coming from, but I think he learned a lesson about you got to be careful in terms of what you demonstrate after a play like that because it's possible.
You got to pop up.
Exactly.
Let's get back to the huddle. Let's go, guys.
No.
That's crazy.
100%. And on a related note to that, one of the things you mentioned I want to piggyback off of is red zone inefficiency, which is what it's been because they only scored a touchdown on one of the two interceptions, and previously in the first three games that had been their Achilles heel. You just wonder, does Dart's threat as a member of the ground attack create additional opportunities creativity-wise for them to be, Howard, more efficient in punching it in? That, I think, is the million-dollar looming question here.
Well, I would say this. He played in a game. He was in the red zone. They still had their issues in the red zone, so there's your answer. I think that, if I'm trying to coach the red zone, if I'm trying to figure out ways, I get man hurts, I get Bellinger in, and I start putting pressure on the defense where you've got two guys that can, handle themselves blocking, so they can block on the edge, and if they decide to release and go into a route, you got two big targets on the field. So I think the tight ends are going to have to find a way, and they're just going to have to find a way to get involved with the red zone area because they're the biggest threats, the biggest people on the field, and it could cause these DBs, these linebackers, these edge guys a little problem if they're worried about this guy releasing out into a pattern. And when you're worried about somebody releasing out into a pattern, you don't really come off the ball to hit them that hard because you don't want to miss. And if you're afraid to come off the ball and hit them that hard, then you run the back right behind him, and you got a first down. So that's how I look at it.
And in fairness, the Chargers had the number one red zone defense coming in. Teams were only scoring touchdowns 47% of the time. So, I mean, they had been pretty stingy in that department.
Well, the Giants had an issue with the offensive line. They were only bringing four guys, right? And we had like 5 sacks or 4 sacks or whatever it was. For whatever reason, the one defensive end, they almost like refused to block him. And I'm like, why is it like, I'm like, if there's only, that means there's 5 guys blocking 3 guys. So I couldn't figure that part out. It just didn't make, I said, maybe it's a RPO and I'm just not seeing it correctly or something, but almost every time he came, he got there, and it's because no one put a hand on him.
Yeah, Tuli Pulotu had 5 quarterback hits, 5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and 10 total tackles. I'd say that's quite a game.
Yeah.
Had a field day. And he's the big guy filling in for some of the injuries that they've had up front. But he put his stamp all over and was huge in the red zone, a big reason why the Chargers were able to rally and remained in the game. But I guess getting back to my point, I'm looking back at the red zone plays, and they got Theo Johnson in one of the touchdowns for that. But prior to that, Scadaboo wasn't getting much push, no gain. And then the previous one, the killer was the Greg Van Roten false start. I mean, you eventually all of a sudden come to the realization, all right, now we don't even benefit from being at the 3. We're pushed back to the 8. And then they did run Dart once for a yard, but then they gave it to Scadaboo. So that's why I was just wondering, does the element of surprise, now in fairness, opponents are going to eventually catch on. Dart has design runs and he has the tendency to run, so it's going to be that game of chess here moving forward. Remember, this was the first legitimate NFL film that teams are going to have, so the Saints are going to have a much different perspective compared to what the Chargers were looking at coming in, which was more college film and a very limited group of preseason snaps.
Yeah, but that's why I said that's why your tight ends are going to be very effective in the red zone going forward. They can post guys up, put them on their hip, and he is very, I guess you would call it specific where he throws the ball. He can put it in the right spot every time. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can figure out how to do that.
Last thing I want to touch on before we open up the phone lines, and appreciate everybody tuning in here. Lance Medow, Howard Cross with you on Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. When Dable spoke to the media yesterday, he was asked about just Dart taking command of the team and the interaction with players. And one of the things that was brought up in the post-game press conference is the play that sealed it when Dart connected with Theo Johnson, and that pretty much helped the Giants run out the clock, that was a play in the playbook, Howard, that it wasn't designed for what Theo ran, but during the week, Jackson told him, listen, if they give us this look, I want you to make that adjustment, and it wound up actually coming to fruition during the course of the game. And it just seems as if Dable has a great deal of confidence and flexibility in Dart, even though he's only one start into his career. And I think that at least is something that stands out in terms of, A, his knowledge, his comfort level, and his command of the offense thus far.
Well, he spends a lot of time with Dart. He's when he came in, just trying to get him up to speed as quickly as possible. He also has known him for a long time. So those two qualities just by themselves make them a good pairing. It's going to be interesting to see if his offensive line can hold up. Can they continue to keep him upright? Is he going to be able to continue to run at the pace that he's running? Can we keep the backs going the way they're going? And that's another thing. We're going to have to have another back. We had Singletary and Scadaboo and nobody. So there's going to have to be. Well,
they got Turbo on the practice squad, so they could very well call him up.
I don't know how many games he gets to play before they have a problem with it, but they're going to need another back. They just have to have one because anything can happen.
No, without a doubt, over the course of a game or in the event that something happens in the next game or two. I mean, once again, you could still call up a player for the practice squad. I think maybe the way they're looking at it, though, is, and this goes back to my initial point about Dart is almost your third running back. Not to say that you want that. I understand, Howard. No, I'm not campaigning, but with the way that this offense is operating right now, it's Dart, Scadaboo, and Singletary, I guess, is the component of the run game, even though he's your signal caller.
Okay. Well, again, I think you need a third back.
No, and your point is well taken. Yeah. I just think that probably at least what influenced going into this game was some injuries elsewhere.
I know.
Coming in. Yep. But moving forward, when they have the numbers game cooperate, Turbo can easily be called up, and he could be the third running back. And could be also a potential candidate in the return game, too.
Yes.
If you want to move Gunnar Olszewski more into what we were talking about earlier as a receiver. That I think can really help.
That could really help.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. It's presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. And we are in the Giants podcast studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. And we start off the festivities with Carl in Syracuse. Carl, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
How you doing, guys?
Great.
Doing well. What's on your mind?
Almost forgot what it felt like to win.
Okay.
I want to start with a comment about Dart, how you said he was very commanding. And it definitely wanted to point out how poised he was on that, backed up against the goal line on the off-script play, running to his right, and just directing wide receivers to come back. I mean, great decision-making.
That was. He did a good job right there.
Yeah, I believe that was Darius Slayton who he was calling back for that play. Yep.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the wide receivers, like you guys were talking about, Collins and Hyatt and their chance to step up. And then you were just talking about running backs and how we could use another. Turbo, he definitely showed a lot of speed and explosiveness, especially in the screen game, and seemed to have a good connection with Dart. So I like the idea of him coming up. But then when Tracy does come back, what do you think about getting him more incorporated into into intermediate routes, because he was a wide receiver in college? I mean, he almost reminds me of like a young, a little bit bigger Sterling Shepard.
I mean, he would be good at getting into some intermediate routes, but they're going to need him to run the ball. So he'll be catching the ball out of the backfield. He'll probably be catching the ball on the outside, some of the wide plays. What it looks like they're throwing the ball to him, but it's almost a pitch because he's so wide to the outside, trying to get him outside the defense. He's also a guy that's fleet of foot, so they want to get him out in space as much as possible and keep him from running between the tackles if they can. And, I know you're thinking of him kind of being like a Wandale Robinson guy out there on the edge, kind of in a slot. He can do that. Probably hasn't been practicing a lot lately, but he was doing it in college, so there's always a possibility.
And remember, Scadaboo can also catch the ball in the backfield too, and we even saw that yesterday.
Right. It'll definitely add another element just of surprise and being able to move guys around when he does come back.
There are gonna be a lot of guys moving around. That's for sure. The motion's gonna be crazy,
especially
definitely.
with having to account for Dart and his mobility. Yeah. So that's the new flavor to this offense. But I think at the end of the day, they still need a legitimate conventional wide receiver to command attention and assume a role in this offense, no matter how much you move the running backs around.
To be a threat in the offense, yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then one question, on that play that broke down with Deonte Banks on Quentin Johnson, do you know what happened there? Was he expecting more help from, was it Belton that was the safety there?
Belton was the safety on you're talking about the Johnson touchdown, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought it was a hell of a throw by Herbert. I mean, if you go back and you watch that, Carl, he threaded the needle where he put it the only place where those two defenders were not going to get it, and led him right to the end zone.
And basically what happens is Banks bit on the double move. He definitely bit on a double move. When he makes the out move, Banks comes up a little bit, and then he just runs by him. And Belton didn't have the same kind of doesn't have the same kind of top speed as the starting safety does. So he didn't get there in time. So that's kind of what happened on the play. It was very interesting to watch the DBs play so far off their guys, because I'm like, why are they so far off? And then you see why, because they can get behind them.
And a lot of those Chargers wide receivers are great route runners. I mean, Keenan Allen is one of the best in NFL history, who's still going strong in his second stint. Ladd McConkey was quiet yesterday, but he also is polished in his second year in the league. And Johnston's come a long way. Because remember, right, he was injured previously, and there was questions about whether or not he could fulfill the role of the vertical threat. And he just seems to be a completely different player this season.
Yeah, all those guys are good when you think about it. And you got a quarterback and get them the ball that.
Yep.
It makes them more confident, and they're competing with each other, trying to see who's going to catch the most passes in the game, always. So it's kind of funny to watch that.
And getting back to the play, as you mentioned, Banks by default is trailing on the play because of the move that Johnston put on him. But even by the time that Banks recovered somewhat, Belton needed enough time to go all the way over to the opposite hash. And once again, Herbert's ball placement, even if Belton was a little bit over, Howard, I still don't know if you would have had a legitimate shot on that.
If he was over the top, he wouldn't have thrown it.
So you think Herbert would have then hesitated and making the throw?
He wouldn't have been.
He loves to take those chances, it seems.
He puts it on them. He'll definitely put it on them.
Does he ever?
But if a guy's coming over the top, he knows better than to throw it to him, because it's nothing good happens in that point.
Let's head back to the lines, and we check in with Jay in Phoenix. Jay, what's happening?
What's up, Jay?
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing well.
Good.
Good. I just have a question about the wide receiver situation, and I was just kind of thinking and wanted to see if you guys knew. When we've put now Malik onto the IR, our roster's down to 52 people. Can we go into a game with 52 players, or do you have to have 53 on a Sunday? Because my thought is that you can elevate guys to the practice squad, try them out each week, and see which one fits. Little Jordan Humphrey or Marset or Smith Marset, or there's another. Dalen Combry. So I'm just curious how that works. And then I just have a couple suggestions on who we might be able to look at who might fit in the system.
Well, to get to your question, you remember you're calling players up from the practice squad each week that is in addition to the 53-man roster, and then that impacts how many inactives you have. So you don't really have to worry about 52 versus 53. That doesn't prevent you from calling players up the day before from the practice squad. So you could still implement your philosophy where every week you bring up a new player, because remember, there's a limit on how many times you could call up a player before you have to put them on the 53. So you can still do what you're saying, but I don't think you need to get caught up in, do you leave a spot open? You could still call up a guy even if you have 53 on the roster. And I find it very hard to believe that they're going to operate with just 52 because of other needs on the roster.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the two guys I was thinking about was, they know the offense. They're both on practice squads. Isaiah Hodgins is with the Steelers, and then Gabe Davis up in Buffalo. Both of them know, Dable's system, so they might be able to fit and acclimate quicker than, some other free agent out there who's got to learn everything. And those two guys Hodgins has proven successful. His best cluster of games was with us in 2022, and Gabe Davis, if he's healthy, I think might be a good fit too.
No, both names that certainly have ties to Giants personnel, and appreciate the phone call. Keep in mind, Gabe Davis, according to reports, had conversations with the Giants, and it never came to fruition.
Okay.
So I think that may mean either he didn't want to come here or vice versa. Once again, you can read into that as much as you wish, and they went with other options. And Howard, I say this, there's a reason why Jalen Hyatt is on the roster. There's a reason why Bo Collins is on the roster. I would think that the Giants are going to give these two guys every opportunity, and I'll throw in Gunnar Olszewski as well, who I'm campaigning for, to run with the opportunity and the job as opposed to bringing in somebody. Because, even if you bring in Gabe Davis and Isaiah Hodgins, remember, the offense has changed since Hodgins was here last. Okay,
Yep.
He has no chemistry with Jackson Dart, and the same thing is with Gabe Davis. So the two guys that were in camp, and at least here, like you said, with the scout team and the second team, I think have a better chance of success in the short term than any of those other two names, even if they may have some familiarity with the scheme.
Well, I think the guys we're mentioning, with Hyatt and Bo, is I think they're going to get the opportunity, and the reason why I think that is because they've been active every week. It's not like they've been inactive and standing on the sideline and okay, we don't need you this week. We're going to bring somebody else in, or that. They've been active all the time. So by being active means they're actually running plays in practice, means they're actually getting reps and getting opportunities in practice, and they're doing the scout team stuff as much as possible if coach will let them. I don't know how the rules work anymore, but doing some scout team stuff as well. So those two guys have had some interactions with Dart for the first 3 games, and then this game here they've probably also had interaction with him during practice as well. So I think they're going to get an opportunity. They're just going to be ready to take that next step.
I'm completely with you. Another name that we haven't brought up who is in the mix on the practice squad, little Jordan Humphrey.
Yeah.
So there's another guy, and he's a little bit of a bigger frame.
Much bigger
that
frame.
maybe offers the receiving corps something different that they haven't necessarily showcased.
Yeah, the receivers are good. They've been catching the ball. They've done a lot better. Did a much better in cutting down on the drops and stuff, which has been exciting. Now they got without Malik there, we're going to figure out some more interesting ways to use the receivers. I bet they're going to get more involved in the run game. They'll be blocking a little bit more. That'll cause them to be open quicker when they want to run the little short routes. Because if you're blocking, the guy's looking for you to block, then he's not coming and crashing down the whole time. He's trying to make sure he's not going to get knocked in the head by it. And I should say knocked in the head, but he's trying to knock down from a guy coming from the outside in.
Want to get to some questions also up on YouTube. Appreciate the audience weighing in addition to the phone line. So Scott says, any news on Jackson Dart's hamstring? Was it a pull? When Brian Dable was asked about Dart and how he's feeling, he said he was fine. He didn't necessarily elaborate. And even Dart after the game mentioned that he was just tired from the run and was stretching himself out more so than it being a lingering issue.
I was wondering, where did the hamstring thing come from? I heard
Optics
that.
again.
I heard that. Oh man, I hope his hamstring's okay. I'm like, what? What's wrong with his hamstring? They're like, oh man, he was grabbing his hamstring. I was like, no, he wasn't. He just ran a long way. He's just like, he's trying to bend over and make it look tactful. Catching some
He's
air.
playing the role
Like,
within the script,
he's
yes.
like, oh, yeah, hamstring. I can't breathe.
Let me buy myself some more time here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That was just so funny to hear that. I'm like, the man says, okay, I guess guys think he's hurt. I said, I have to watch when he takes off running. They're gonna make, I guess his hamstring's okay. I started laughing. It was awesome.
Yeah. Well, because the TV broadcast was catching him, stretching out his leg, and they were emphasizing it. But once again, then you saw him run, and he didn't show any signs of being uncomfortable or discomfort.
The camera follows the quarterback all the time, and it's like they have somebody over there just zooming in. Up. I think he's stretching something. Check him out. No, tell the guys. Here it comes. And they pull it, click. Oh yeah, he may have something there. I'm like, they're speculating. That the speculation was wrong.
So they have a camera spy on the quarterback
They have a
in terms of the production team.
trying to
Yes.
find something, or whoever they want to follow on the sideline. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I laugh about it.
His pinky finger not extending fully on his throwing hand. May want to look into that and watch whether or not there's enough spiral on his release here moving forward.
Or he just missed the can with the cup after the Gatorade. He should have been able to hit that from that distance. It might be something with his wrist. I don't know.
Here's more of a schematic question, Howard. This comes from Joe on YouTube. Assuming we will see 8 in the box next Sunday because of the emphasis being on taking away the Giants' run game and accounting for Dart, how can we take advantage of it in the passing game? How can you run successfully against 8 in the box?
Run successfully? Well, the first thing that happens is that I send Hyatt blazing down the field and throw the ball up to see if they're willing to put up with that, and I might even put Bo on the other side, and then and put Slayton in the slot, and just okay, let's see what you guys got, and just let them go. And they're like, okay, if they hit one of them or they get a pass interference, they will back up. That's what I would do. I would not just throw the ball to the receivers. I throw the ball deep to the receivers. In order to do that, the offensive line is going to be able to hold up and give Dart a little time, but that would be the exact thing I would do right off the bat. It's try to hit them deep early. I know that puts you behind the sticks if you don't get it, but it does draw the attention of the entire defense when they're like, okay, they're going to try to hit us with bombs. So that's what I would be doing.
And that's why it goes back to, we were talking about the vertical threat and the necessity of that, because if it's crowded up front, go for the home run, and if the home run works, now all of a sudden it gives them some second thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they need to account for some of those players deep down the field. That's why when you talk about the Malik Neighbors injury, it's more of how defenses are going to respond to the Giants personnel, because, and you know this, Howard, from your playing days, when defensive coordinators get in the room and they look at the opposition, at least we've heard this from even present day DCs, they say, okay, who cannot damage this game that we're going up against, right? At least that's a common phrase and a common element.
They we don't want this guy to beat us, I guess is what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
And they double that guy. They make sure you know where he is, you know the number of the guy, which guys are going to be, and they're going to have to find a guy. And right now, I would say the guy they're probably looking at is Robinson. They're looking at Wendell, and they're like, okay, somebody should be able to put a hand on him. Don't let him have free releases. So they're going to be spending a little extra time trying to get to him. That means he'll be in motion a lot. Where he already is off the ball because he's in the slot. That's going to be the thing that they're going to be trying to keep him from getting started, and that'll give the opportunity to the other guys. The other guys will have plenty of opportunities now. Slayton's going to be – he's a secure receiver. He'll be ready to get the ball. He's been quiet this year, but he runs good routes. He has good hands.
Yep.
He'll be catching the ball. The big thing is going to be, can you get guys down the field deep? And that's where Hyatt and Bo are going to come in.
Well, there was an example. I'm glad you brought up Darius Slayton. Remember, he drew a penalty later in the game when Dart was taking a shot into the end zone, because all of a sudden they didn't account for Slayton's got some speed and he's got that vertical element to his game. So, those are the types of plays. Even if it's not for a big completion, but it gets you a flag down the field, it's the same thing. Great
play. You take a flag on the one every time.
Exactly. All right, let's head back to the phone lines here, and we check in with Randy in California. Randy, welcome aboard. What do you got for us?
Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Hey, I'd like to send my heartfelt out to the Mara family. I heard that he has cancer, and that's, I hope he's okay.
Absolutely, and we read John Mara's statement off the top of the show in case you're just tuning in, and we certainly echo your sentiments.
Yeah, I mean, we can all sit there and look at him and blame him for a lot of things, but you know what? Not right now. Let's give the guy a break. As far as without Neighbors in there, what do you think the offense is going to look like? Because someone's going to have to step up, and this is a good way to find out who's going to step up and stay on the team for next year and forward, and what we got. Because you got a lot of guys fighting for contracts, so it's time to step up, don't you think?
Yeah, that's what we've been talking about for the last few minutes, is that which guys we think are going to get the biggest opportunities, like guys like Hyatt and Bo will definitely be in the game. They're going to have to be in the game for deep threats. We want to have the illusion of, or we want to have the ability to throw the ball deep down the field, to have everybody backing up to cover him. We know that everybody's going to be trying to step up into the box, maybe 8-man box, trying to get up to get closer to Scadaboo. They don't want the offensive line to get too much confidence and get started knocking guys out of the way. And once you see the technique that Scadaboo runs with, that kind of causes a problem for guys, because he's not necessarily running through holes. He's jumping over guys' legs, and he's creating his own hole, so to speak. And when you can't see him, he's on top of you real quick, and it's hard to tackle him because he's already so low to the ground. So it's been a bit of an issue for some of these guys. They're looking around. If they don't get him in the backfield, he's harder to hit, because he's coming up from behind like, oh my God, there he is. Like, he kind of appears on you right away.
And Randy, appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring. I think you want to tap into, which is what you're hitting on, the athleticism of some of the talent you have now. That doesn't mean that it should just be all short passes and hope for the best with Yak. No. But I think you can at least play into Scadaboo, Wan'Dale Robinson, and some of these other elusive playmakers that if you can get them out in space, and the defense has to account for Dart's mobility, that maybe that can at least lead to productive drives without getting the 45-yard to 50-yard home run.
Well, yes, but I think the rollout's going to be going to start to come into play. Dart's going to be outside the pocket, some of you saw, and I think that's just going to be because he called Slayton back on the play when he was outside. They're going to look at that and they're going to be like, okay, now we can have some options. We can have some comebacks. We can have some goes. The thing that I would love to see is for them to set up that bubble screen, the play that I hate the most in football, and the guys in the front that are supposed to block just take off, because the DBs will be sitting there trying to get to the receiver that they think that they're going to throw the ball to, and I never see anybody do that. I'm waiting for let it be our team. Coach Dable, if you're listening.
And I'm sure he is, yes.
But that is something I would love for our team to do, because every team seems to try to block those guys out there, and the DBs are getting smarter and smarter, and they're pressing more and more to get to the guy. So I'm like, all right, time to pump it and let it ride. Let's see what happens. So I think that's going to be something that's going to come up soon. Once you do it once, they'll back up forever.
But you also just brought up an interesting point, Howard, with respect to the comeback route by Darius Slayton. Mm-hmm. Now receivers also need to account for Jackson can extend plays. Yeah. And that means in terms of your route running, you may run a route and all of a sudden you look at the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. He's still running around, which means a level of adjustment has to come into play here, so that you maybe help out your quarterback to still salvage a play.
Well, they're scramble rules. Now, I don't know what the rules are for this particular team or what this particular offense, but there are always scramble rules. If you're deep, you come up. If you're short, you usually go deep. If you're across, you come over. If you're over, you go across. You're trying to create more space for yourself and find open windows. And some guys run up and sit down right across the first down marker after they beat their guy, and they're like waiting for their quarterback to turn. And if you can see them, it becomes a big play. So, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see if Dart starts to get outside the pocket a little bit more, because now he's out there. You got to come up to try to get him. If you don't come up to get him, he's going to run the ball. So all of a sudden it becomes more pressure on the defense to try to figure out another way to get in front of him, figure out another way to slow him down. I think that's going to be one of the things that's going to help him out a lot. It's going to help out the offensive line a lot, because once you get out in space on the side, all hell could break loose really quickly.
Let's head back to the phone lines. Doug is in New York joining us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Doug? Doug?
Hey, what's happening?
Doug going once?
Hi, Howard.
Hey, Doug.
And Lance. Coming back to Jackson Dart and little Jordan Humphrey, even if they brought him up, isn't the rule you only can dress 46, or did that change since COVID?
No, there is a limitation in terms of, yes, you get the roster, let's say, to 55, and then I think it's 48 that you can have active because of the 2 additional spots. So you have some wiggle room, but yeah, you can't have everybody active.
No.
Clearly, you still need to have your set of inactives.
So then that might be they'd have to switch somebody out, or if they brought up Jordan Humphrey and want to use him, they'd have to switch somebody out that would be inactive that has been active before.
Correct. Well, just like, for example, when they called up Tamon Fox because of injuries, then all of a sudden you got to sacrifice somebody. So, yeah, you don't just call up a player and then you add him into the mix. You're going to have to then take away from another position that could be healthier or a position that you think you can get away without having one less personnel.
Well, here's the other thing about this. I know what we're talking about, but we have to remember that Neighbors is down. So now there is an open spot.
Which means they're probably going to call up a permanent wide receiver as part of the 53.
Yeah.
So one of those guys on the practice squad that we're talking about is probably going to be the next guy called up to make the 53, Doug. So you're already going to have an additional wide receiver. But if you then wanted to call an additional wide out up to give yourself more options and different routes for Jackson Dart, I think that's something that certainly is feasible.
Yeah, so they're kind of competing over there in that spot right now to see who's going to be the guy that comes up.
Well, only reason I mentioned little Jordan Humphrey because I remember that him and Jackson Dart made some big plays in preseason. So
yeah, he threw the touchdown to him in Buffalo.
A connection that probably be easier for them in practice to develop some special routes for them to run. But thanks for everything.
Yeah, you got it, Doug. Appreciate the phone call. I mean, that goes back to what Howard and I were talking about earlier. You had mentioned Dart had been on the second unit and then with the scout team, so he's worked with several of the guys that are on the practice squad, but I don't think little Jordan Humphrey is going to all of a sudden leapfrog Jalen Hyatt and Bo Collins. He's also a different wide receiver than the two of them, but is it possible that through the conversations that Dart has with Kafka and Dable, and he says, hey, when I worked with little Jordan Humphrey in the preseason, he ran this route. I thought we had success. Maybe we can work it in if they choose to call him up. I think that's reasonable.
Well, again, I know they need to call somebody up, maybe, or they need to call up Turbo and let him be the running back. And there's a lot of different options there. And would you say move Olszewski over to receiver more, getting more action in the receiver role? I don't know how they're going to do it and which guy's going to do what, but it just seems like, like I said, they have another receiver on the field with Olszewski. And if they bring Turbo in, I don't know if he catches punts or not, but if he can catch punts, then all of a sudden you got your extra back. You got your extra returner. Now we can get a little more action out here.
Well, Turbo certainly is capable of special teams. I mean, I covered him when he was at Columbia, so I can tell you he's got that in his history, and that's why I think he's intriguing from that standpoint. But once again, they may, and I'm just looking at it from the outside looking in here, I think right now, even though you mentioned they could use an additional running back, prioritizing the receiving core is number one, more so than I think any other facet on the roster. Because granted, they still have Darius Slayton, you still have Wan'Dale Robinson, and you have Hyatt, and you have Bo Collins, but given in the blink of an eye, Howard, within a game, you can lose a guy, and Olszewski. But if you don't want to use Olszewski as a wide receiver, I think you have to protect yourself with perhaps that fifth wide receiver, at least somebody that is versatile enough to run routes.
Okay.
So that's at least how I would be leaning at it based on the initial stages. Even if they bring somebody in from the outside of the organization, I still think they're leaving that roster spot open to prioritize wide receiver more so than any other position. Because, once again, based on what also Dable said in yesterday's meeting with the media, knock on wood, it seems as if they came out of yesterday relatively healthy outside of Neighbors.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like they have, a necessity. We're getting a little bit physical with one another here, so you got to watch out for me. Make those small jokes early. I'm crafty like Camp Scatterbo to pop out of nowhere. But anyway, getting back to the point at hand, it doesn't look like they may need to at least call up a player at another position, at least based on what the early stages of the week look like. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. Let's check in with Mike in Springfield, Massachusetts. What's happening, Mike?
Hey, guys, I'm interested in the matchup between our Lions and the New Orleans Saints. I'm worried that our offensive line will not match up well against the New Orleans line, and vice versa. I'm wondering whether or not we're going to have the same opportunities with our defensive line against New Orleans lines. And I'd appreciate your comments on that, guys.
Sure, absolutely. And we'll let you go on that note. It's a really good question, and I don't mind at least jumping into a little early preview. There is news. One of the players that the Saints has relied on, right guard Cesar Ruiz, is going to be out. So just like the Chargers, they're already down one of their starters. And I think you brought it up, hey, you got to take that into consideration context-wise, but also a big part of the NFL, Howard, is they don't feel sorry for you in the NFL. If you're beat up, so your opponent then has a chance to take advantage. And the Giants took advantage of an unhealthy Chargers offensive line. Now, the Saints are not necessarily limping in to the same degree as the Chargers, but Ruiz is a starting offensive lineman. And he's at the right guard spot. And I think you've got to test who they bring in, and you've got to see whether or not they can establish the run and pass protect also for a young quarterback in Spencer Rattler. So that, at least early stages of the week, could be an opportunity for the Giants to capitalize. As far as the Saints' defensive line, I don't know how much you saw even after the Giants game. The Saints, they stuck with the Bills this past week. I mean, they gave Buffalo and Josh Allen some trouble. This is a thorn in the side of you type of defense, and you still have some veterans in this defense. I mean, Demario Davis may still be one of the best middle linebackers in the NFL. He is so well disciplined in helping stop the run. Chase Young and Cam Jordan are veteran pass rushers. I don't think they have the same degree as the Chargers, where there's maybe a game wrecker that you're like, oh my God, but I think they've got a lot of seasoned veterans who have plenty of reps under their belt, and they're pretty well-disciplined defense. So this is still not going to be a picnic for the Giants' ability to pass protect as well as run the football.
I think the Giants are going to be okay against the Saints. I think that we are giving them a lot of credit. Yes, they kept the game close, but they didn't win the game. I think that everybody gets up when you see when you see Josh Allen standing on the other sideline. Your defense is going to play a little bit better, and they've talked to each other and leaning on each other. Okay, we got to make sure this guy doesn't beat us, and of course we beat him. But you get excited for that. They're going to be looking at the Giants, and they're like, oh, this is our get right game. Excuse me.
Yeah, because they're still looking for their first win of the season. I know you get emotional over the Saints. It's okay. I understand.
This is going to be our get right game, and they're going to be trying to do everything they can to how we're going to confuse the rookie quarterback. So that right there, that one statement is the thing that gets teams all the time. When you do things that you don't ordinarily do, you also open up yourself to mistakes. And that's where, yes, they're veterans, yes, but if they're trying to bring an extra guy, if they're trying to disguise their coverage, and all of a sudden you're going to be making mistakes. And that's you just don't it doesn't always work that the rookie quarterback loses because he hasn't seen this before. It's going to be hard for him.
Well, you bring up, once again, another interesting point, and I remember looking over some of the statistics, how Jim Harbaugh fared against rookie quarterbacks during his career, right? And, barely anybody had success. So
9-1 or something like that.
Correct. And I'm sure they're going to do a lot of that, again, with respect to, because the Saints defensive coordinator is Brandon Staley. Staley, who was the former Chargers coach, coincidentally, before Harbaugh took over. But Staley has had a very good track record of being a savvy defensive coordinator. So I understand what you're saying, Howard, that sometimes you overthink things when you go up against rookie quarterbacks. If it was a newer defensive coordinator, I would be a little bit more concerned about maybe New Orleans thinking big and creative. I think the fact that Staley has
done it before,
been there before, this is not his first rodeo, maybe he doesn't fall for that dangling carrot that perhaps other defensive coordinators or other younger coaches would.
Well, what's gonna happen is he's gonna wind up seeing Dart outside the pocket, and it's gonna throw off everything. If we're thinking we're gonna disguise this and whatever, they're gonna get caught because Dart's gonna be outside the pocket this coming week because he looked good outside the pocket, and they're gonna start designing plays to get him outside the pocket. That's gonna be harder on the defense. It's harder to blitz a guy if he's rolling away from the blitz outside the pocket and throwing the ball down the field. It's hard to blitz a guy when you're swinging the extra guy across the line to pick up that guy coming on the edge. So it's going to be interesting to see. I know Staley is a good coach, been around for a while, but if he was that good, he'd still be wherever he was before. All coaches keep moving around constantly. So
do they ever?
Yeah, it's not a forever job, so to speak. So it's going to be interesting for me to see how this coach, this coordinator, and these players, how they're going to handle, getting after Dart. Now, the one thing I can say is that it is loud in New Orleans. So he's going to have a system. They're going to be on top of it. They're going to have to know exactly what they're doing because it gets loud in New Orleans. And if they get in a game, it gets louder. So you got to take them out of the game early.
And where the Saints have been taken out of games themselves, whether it's home or on the road, is they've had headaches on special teams. So maybe that's an area that could help out Jackson Dart as well as the defense. But this unit, they've got 11 sacks in 4 games, which is pretty good based on the math in the early stages of the season. And, I mean, it goes back to, once again, Howard, the principles we were talking about earlier. I think if you're Brandon Staley, you're going to come into this game, before you get consumed by Dart, you're going to say, let's contain Cam Scatterbill. Okay, let's put Dart in passing situations on 3rd down so maybe he can't be thinking about erasing everything simply by taking off. And then if you do that, then you feel as if you have an opportunity to maybe get some hits on the quarterback. If the Saints don't solidify their run defense, you're going to make it very favorable for Jackson Dart. So before I think Staley tries to dig deep into those bag of tricks and all those other elements, I think he's going to emphasize, guys, this week we've got to limit the Giants' conventional run game. And if we do that, then we put Dart in more of a pass-happy situation, which the Chargers failed to do for the majority of the game this past week.
Well, you're trying to get guys behind the sticks. That's what they say. You want to have 0 and 1 yards on the first play. If you can do that, then all of a sudden, the 2nd and 8, when it's 2nd and 9, it takes a whole lot to try to get enough yards to make sure it's manageable for 3rd down. You're not always going for the first down on that. You're always not going for the first down when you're 2nd and 8. You're usually trying to figure out, okay, I just need 5 or 6 yards here so we have something manageable. If we get a first down, it's a bonus. And that's how your play calling starts to go. If he gets 4 yards on the first carry and it's 2nd and 6, then you don't know, are they going to run it again? Oh, God. Or what's going to happen?
Guess again.
And it becomes a problem. You're trying to make them as one-dimensional as possible. And if the Giants go out and score in their first drive, like they did in this last game, that creates a problem for the Saints because they're not a big offensive juggernaut right now with the young quarterback there. Trying to find his way, trying to get all the receivers healthy, and they're not all healthy. So you got one or two guys you got to lock down. You still got a pretty good running back, and you got a quarterback that's he's trying to find his way.
21 points. Okay, it's still hovering in that 17 to 21 point department. So you're still putting pressure on your defense to make plays. And remember, and once again, this is not to take anything away from Jackson Dart, and a victory is a victory, and brownie points don't matter in the NFL like college football. But Howard, as we talked about earlier, the interceptions shortened the field immensely. Okay, it's not as if they had to go 85, 90 yards consistently, the offense on Sunday.
But he did it one time, didn't he?
He did it opening the game, though, when things tend to be scripted and you have the element of surprise much more so in play than as you get into the later stages of the game.
I think he'll be just fine. I'm not.
I'm not doubting that, but I'm saying that all of these things, you got to put them into context in terms of what are you reading into from the first performance and what are defenses that are now scouting him thinking about.
Well, I think that something that helped out a lot also is that they ran no huddle offense.
Pacing.
So if you're running no huddle, guys can't get on the field, can't get out the field. The referee is not holding the ball to let you guys get set up, and it becomes a little bit of a stressful thing for the defense. The defense is like, okay, this is not good. And before the game gets started, they basically got their hands on their hips. That's what you're trying to accomplish. So. They're going to be talking to their team about pace. Okay, they're going to come out and try to go no huddle. Let's go. Let's get our guys in there. And if you can get the right group of guys in there, and all of a sudden, like say you got Theo in there and you got Bellinger in there, and all of a sudden Theo splits out in the slot. Like, wait a minute, you got a problem. So I think there's some ways to, in that first drive to really put some pressure on them. Then once you get it on them. The next drive, you just kind of come back with that's what they did this game. They came out a little no huddle, then they came out the next drive and they started running the ball. And then all of a sudden, the team's like, wait a minute, I thought they were trying to throw it, and it becomes a bigger issue. Because
you don't have a good read yet on what exactly they're going to do. And I'm just looking over the numbers from the Bills-Saints game, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this, Howard. There's a lot of mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, okay? That's clear. But They just coming off a game in which they went up against Josh Allen, who coincidentally ran Dable's offense in Buffalo, and he can create lanes right himself, and
Yes,
James Cook had over 100 yards. But I guess what I'm getting at is, do you think the Saints maybe are a little bit better prepared for Dart, given they just went up against a Josh Allen type of quarterback?
No. Josh Allen is a different breed of quarterback. So when guys are seeing him, they're all hands on deck. They don't have the same kind of intensity looking at a dart. Like, it's Jackson, it's Allen, it's a couple other guys like Jalen Hurt. You don't want that guy hurting you with his legs.
A nice pun there. Very nice. Were you working on that during the week, or that was a new one on the fly?
Just on the fly. But
very nice.
But you're trying to figure out a way to make sure that you're making them throw out of the bucket instead of like running outside and getting out and running down the field. That's what you're trying to do. Josh Allen's just running over guys. Josh Allen's jumping over guys. Josh Allen
different frame. Too.
Yeah, it's just too. It's way different playing against him than playing against somebody else. As maybe Lamar Jackson could be close, but if Lamar gets outside, he's gone. So like that those guys, like Josh Allen's just a different one of them. So I don't think they're going to be super prepared to play against Dart because of Josh Allen. Because you're playing against Josh Allen, you're like, okay, we have a true running back that can throw the ball 80 yards. We can't let him get out of the pocket. We can't let him do this. We can't let him do that. And he's still doing anything he wants to do.
The only reason I brought that up is there was one run that Allen had for 27 yards. He ran up the gut. He juked one guy, Howard, who literally went probably to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
That guy didn't want to hit. He didn't want to hit him. He just didn't want to hit him.
Yeah. I mean, Dart certainly has athleticism. I'm not saying it's in Josh Allen territory, but I guess that elusiveness that you maybe have to account for.
Okay.
That's what I was perhaps bringing up as a means of comparison, but still way early in terms of putting him in that territory. But encouraging signs.
Parcells would say, don't put him in Canton yet.
Correct. Absolutely. And I would subscribe to that same school of thought. I'm not putting things too ahead of the curve here. All right, well, that's going to wrap up Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Appreciate everybody tuning in. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants, and we are broadcasting from the Giants podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. Reminder, the archive of this show and our entire podcast network is on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcast. And if you want more puns on the fly, please, at Howard Cross 87, highly recommend it. And I am at Lance Medow, one word, last name, Medow. I may give you a pun, but Jalen Hurts hurting you, I don't know if I'll go that deep into my bag of tricks. I'm just throwing it out there. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Howard, an absolute pleasure as always.
Hey, it's good to see you, Lance.
Absolutely, same here. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Wednesday right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Have a good one.